Hello, Iris J here with Madrona's Pulse Teachings, and I hope this finds you doing well. We are going to chat about Saturn today. As I'm recording this, we are just still very much coming out of a Pisces full moon, depends when you watch this. But it was a powerful moon, still is a powerful time. A lot of folks are feeling this in ways that we can only feel things when we're dealing with a Pisces moon. Not just a Pisces moon, though. A Pisces moon conjunct Saturn, which is maybe part of why I'm feeling such a strong need to chat about Saturn. But because Saturn is in its retrograde in Pisces right now, and Saturn moving through Pisces is really significant on various levels. It's really significant for us in our own life. It's very significant in the collective. We're going to be working with Saturn in Pisces up through 2026, and then in 2026 when Saturn enters Aries, so starting a whole new journey around the zodiac, this is going to come in with a bit of a bang because Saturn is going to come into its conjunction with the planet Neptune, who's going to be having entered into Aries as well. So we're going to have this conjunction of Neptune energies, Saturn in Aries at the very, very beginning of, literally the beginning of Aries, and that's going to be in 2026. And so it's really important to check in with this Saturn energy moving through Pisces. I also think that check-in is really important because it can help to ground us. Okay, Saturn is, despite the harsh reps that Saturn gets, Saturn is a grounding energy. It is the archetype of boundaries in all sorts, boundaries from what we need in our life to find a stronger sense of self, into the literal boundaries between the known and the unknown. And conscious or not, we have been working with Saturn energy during this time of this Pisces full moon, because the moon was conjunct Saturn, and then leading up to that, we had the sun in a very direct opposition with Saturn. So Saturn energy is present in our psyche, in the psyche of this body, the collective psyche of the cosmos, and it's important to check in. If this is your first time on my channel, hello and welcome. I talk about all things astrology, weaving in with spirituality, weaving into healing journeys that I believe all of us are on, though we're in them in very different ways. And astrology is just such an amazing medium for us to work with in understanding our own journeys, our relationship to the collective, what it is that we're doing here. And so we talk about all these things on my channel. And welcome, please subscribe. It really, really helps smaller channels do our thing when you subscribe, and I really appreciate it. So Saturn, so how are you doing coming out of this full moon? Check in with yourself. Even if you're watching this a week after I'm posting it, we're still working with this energy. And so I'm going to talk about Saturn in this particular instance and where it is in its journey through Pisces. And also doing this opens up to talking about Saturn a little bit more generally, which I don't think we can ever do enough of. To be honest, I don't think we can ever talk enough about any of the archetypes, because the archetypes are alive. They're living energy, and we embody them. And we're always evolving individually and collectively, and therefore the archetypes are always evolving. And this is something that we just see in all the different schools of astrology that are out there. We could practice traditional Hellenistic astrology. We can practice, as I practice, evolutionary astrology, though I am absolutely inspired by other traditions as well. And now I wanted to go into other things I'm inspired by in my astrology practice, but I'll stop there. But astrology is always evolving, and it has to, because astrology is a way of making meaning, and meaning changes, right? Meaning changes in terms of gender, meaning changes in terms of so many things. And so Saturn is a wonderful place to look at how we can see how the human journey is evolving, and really by that our human consciousness is evolving. And Saturn is absolutely going to evolve, because Saturn is the boundary between what is known and unknown. Saturn is so related to the collective human consciousness, to our individual journeys, because it literally is that boundary line. And we just had a full moon conjunct Saturn in Pisces, and most likely that boundary line between what is known and unknown has shifted for us. If this was dead on with something in our chart, or if we were just really, really feeling it, then that may be more significant for some of us. This is always how astrology works, but there has been a shift in terms of the boundaries between known and unknown. And this is part of what Saturn is doing in its journey through Pisces right now. So Saturn came in to Pisces in March 2023. And as I said, it will completely conclude in February 2026. And right now we are with Saturn retrograde. So we've had Saturn retrograde since June, and this will go until the very beginning of November. So Saturn went through Pisces, it went up to 7 degrees, then it went retrograde. It's going to go right back to 0 degrees, and then it's going to station direct and go forward on its journey until we hit its next retrograde, which will be next summer. And firstly, what is Saturn doing in Pisces? This is the final sign of the zodiac. Water sign, collective unconscious, divine mystery, ultimate compassion, unconditional love, the dissolving of the ego into oneness. It is also the void, or emptiness, as if you come at it through a Buddhist tradition. This is the archetype where the ego ultimately is dissolving. It's also why Pisces governs addictions, because addictions and the use of substances, whether that's through addiction or through something that's centered as more of a medicine journey, substances support us to dissolve the ego, as does deep meditation, as does mindful living sometimes. Mindful living can also be directed towards focusing so that I can be on the stock market and make more profit. There's all sorts of humans will do anything to make that profit. But Pisces is the dissolving of the ego. It is we go around this whole journey of the zodiac, and then we're in Pisces. It's deep, deep waters. It is deep intuition as well. It is everything that is beyond the day-to-day. It is dreamscapes. It is music sonicscapes. It is artscapes. It is beyond the day-to-day. And here we have Saturn, who's all about constructing that boundary of what is known, of constructing life within those boundaries, of creating limits, both on the emotional world and on the physical world, psychological world, spiritual world. And one of the ways we can work with Saturn in Pisces is that it is helping us to create ground in these incredible spiritual depths of this human journey. And wherever we have Saturn in our chart, and so right now we're working with those first 7 degrees. Saturn's right around 3, it's moving down to 0. Saturn is working to help create ground there in an archetype of our psyche and life that we do not really have ground in. Pisces doesn't have boundaries, and Pisces doesn't have ground, and Saturn brings both of those. So Saturn moving through Pisces is really an opportunity for us to firstly reflect on how we want to bring the spiritual into a more tangible place in our life. And the house that we have Saturn transiting through Pisces is really indicating how and where that wants and needs to happen. Another aspect of this is that Saturn is moving through Pisces, and it is most likely creating some endings. And it's very possible that during this past full moon, we got a insight, an illumination of one or more of those endings in our life. And this is not superficial. This is, even if it's something that seems kind of not a big deal, oh, that's ending, like a relationship that wasn't that important, or maybe a work contract and we've already rationalized why it's not a big deal. Or it could be something very internal, such as the way that I've held myself in a workspace, or the way that I've held myself in relationship to making money, or the way that I've held myself in relation to showing myself and my spiritual self out in that world. There's infinite versions of what could be ending. But it's really important to bring a little bit of reflection. And we're entering into the major retrograde season of the year. Right as I'm making this, Mercury is retrograde, Venus is finishing a retrograde, Uranus has just gone retrograde, Jupiter is going to go retrograde. All of that meaning it's a wonderful time to reflect on what's ending. And most likely, this ain't the end of the story. Okay, it's definitely not, because Saturn is going to go back to 0 and then it's going to come over these degrees again. So this first stage of the Saturn journey is ending, because then it's not going to come back to these degrees again for, say, 28 years. And this is the beginning of that work that we're doing in Pisces, which is going to go all the way through to 2026. And as we acknowledge and as we bring our mental focus with our heart and be honest about what's ending, and Saturn wants us to be honest. Sometimes part of the challenge that comes when we're working with Saturn through something like a Saturn retrograde, or coming out of a Saturn returns, or coming out of a Saturn returns, is acquiring that honesty with ourselves in how we relate to the world, in the boundaries that we have with ourselves and with others, with the world, with our narrative. And that honesty is so important, because Saturn is elder wisdom. Saturn is deep bone, ancient wisdom that we have an ability to tap into within ourselves. And doing that requires honesty. And that's why boundaries are so important, because it helps us actually create limits so that we have more defined space to work within. This is one of the bigger teachings of Saturn. And that's wanting to happen in our Pisces part of our life, where we don't really have those boundaries. And so reflecting on what is coming to an end is a way of creating ground for ourselves, is a way of checking in. And it could be really big too. It could be that maybe what you've done for work is going to end over the next few years, or it could be a relationship is going to end over the next few years, or it could just be a very internal sense of self that's ending. But it's so important to keep in mind that every ending is a liminality that's also bringing us into a new phase. And that is where Saturn is bringing us, which is ultimately a very significant new phase, as that conjunction with Neptune will happen, which we will discuss much more later on. But these are just some things to reflect upon. And that, if Saturn has been hitting you directly in your chart because it's on an angle, or it's talking to a personal planet, sometimes Saturn can feel a bit like a squeezing in. And it's so important to remember breath, the body, and just breathing. And then from that place is we can sit and we can actually let what we don't need to carry with us dissolve. Pisces is wonderful at dissolving. And then that squeezing can recede. And then we can just be in this place of breath, and with our body and mind and heart and consciousness, and checking in with whatever cycles are coming to a close. And again, this probably isn't a finality. We're probably not just finished something, moving on. We also might have just glimpsed something during this full moon that Saturn is really wanting to invite us to begin thinking about closing as we move forward on our journeys. So those are just some thoughts to offer you as we're working with the Saturn and Pisces energy. And I am sending blessings from this beautiful evening in British Columbia, that I really hope the light has supported this. You've got little bits of Gus chewing wood. The little one is too small to see, but he's here too. And that's it. See you when I see you. Take care.